But Shahzad, now we are going to unfold the conversation, a conversation that is very relevant to today. And we have seen that how in Pakistan, not just in Pakistan, globally, we see the rise of the cancel culture and the wokeism. So we've seen that cancel culture initially, I would say the root started with the civil rights activism, but now we've seen that how publicly people are shamed if they do not adhere to one specific ideology, and that public shaming, especially on the social media, that excommunication can be very traumatizing. Free speech and open debate were the pillars of the democracy, but now we see that there is a liberal inquisition and it is falling under the yoke of the tyranny of the ideology of the cancel culture. And if you do not abide by those views, we've seen that how people, there is even the movement within the literary culture that they want to eradicate a lot of literature because they do not abide by that particular dominant ideology. So in order to unfold this conversation, cancel culture, wokeism, is it a liberal inquisition or it is a genuine calling out of the harmful behavior? We are very glad that we have been joined by one of the very famous name in Pakistan's journalism history, and now she's moved to America. She's teaching the kids there in the university. She happens to be Miss BEENA SARWAR. Assalamu alaikum, BEENA, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Hajra.
Right, BEENA, so you've heard the conversation, the introduction, cancel culture. You are teaching in America. You've seen that how this cancel culture debate is unfolding there with their statues that are being removed because they represent or they do not abide by the very dominant ideology. Do you really feel that this cancel culture, this wokeism, is a liberal inquisition or is it a genuine calling out of the harmful behavior?
That's a really good question, Hajra. I think that you can't talk about cancel culture without talking about the rise of social media, and there's two sides to it. It's a complex issue. So on the one hand, political correctness, which is what leads to this cancel culture, has led to a much better, more understanding and awareness about issues, about people, say, about people who are, differently able people, with handicaps or whatever, or, other, minority communities, other communities. So there's more awareness and, there's a demand for respect from communities that have traditionally been marginalized. So the cancel culture kind of becomes like, oh, well, you can't talk like that about this community, or you can't talk like that about somebody, and and then becomes about political issues. I think that it will shake down and hopefully settle down, because right now it's still on the rise in a way, and we've seen in America in a lot of the universities. You had students' agitations shutting down free speech. In some cases, Palestinian people upholding Palestinian point of view were not allowed to come and speak. In some cases, people upholding the Israeli point of view were not allowed to come and speak. And so that's another form of cancel culture, right?
Exactly. But Ms. BEENA, over here there are a few observations. Now imagine that if we are to kind of refer in a very political sphere, it's going to be a little difficult for us to kind of do justice within these 15 or 20 minutes that we have. So let's bring it onto a micro scale over here. Now imagine that we have seen how celebrities were being called out, not just that, we have seen how different NGOs are actually going to jump into play. And I personally do feel that, that for all of these NGOs to come out and play their role at times have caused that bias that wasn't required. Now imagine that before even the case was in the court, people would hurl judgments and be like, hey, you know what, he or she might have done something wrong. How do you think that we can actually kind of come to a point where we can say or share it with our audiences that, hey, you know what, let the court decide first, and then we can have that cancel culture come in later. But we are so eager to jump on to conclusion that imagine that one gentleman who has suffered from it loses their job, does not have any standing in the community, and is unfortunately depressed and anxious too.
Yes, that's a really good point, Shahzad. I think, of course, then the issue there becomes whether the issue at hand is in the court or not. Now everything is it's like a free-for-all. It's like fragmented. So similarly, the media, the legacy media, as we call it, newspapers, television channels, radio, it's all fragmented because now people are giving information on social media, right? You have people not even sending out press releases anymore. They just post whatever they want to on the social media. So it's become very fragmented. So it's become very fragmented, and also it has become very, I think your point about due process is really very relevant and very important. So the point is that even if something is not in a court of law, to step back and to verify things first before attacking them, before attacking people, is really, really important. And so I think that for that purpose, Sapan News, the media outlet I started a couple of years ago. So we have, I'm sorry, somebody banging on the door. We have
Please continue.
code of ethics and responsibility pledge. So a student of mine in America actually said that that everyone should think like a journalist, okay? And everyone should think like a journalist, and that means that people need to, everybody like verify information and provide context and all of that before you start to post something on social media. So
Right. And Beena, we've seen, because you highlighted a very important point, and that is the college protests going on, the campuses protests in the America, and especially in the favor of Gaza. And we've seen that how those campus protests were quashed down. Police came in, and we've seen that was the very ugly manifestation of the cancel culture, because and honestly speaking, I was in the awe of those students, because they were in the Ivy Leagues and they were ready to hold on the bull from the horns, because they believed in the Ghazan cause. Such a beautiful movement to hold down, but we've seen how they were cancelled, how the state cracked down on them.
Yeah.
Yes, they were unarmed protesters, but armed policemen were sent to hold off these protests. So cancel culture, or wokeism, which once represented the inclusivity and the social justice, I think has morphed into an ideology which is suppressing the intellectual freedoms or the rationality that was once a very important feature of the liberal order of the Western society of the America. So now there's also a lot of debate with the rise of the Trump. Many people are labeling it as against the pushback against this wokeism or the cancel culture, because he was also cancelled from the Twitter, and now the owner of the Twitter is actually in his government department. So we are going to unfold this conversation, but after a short break. Don't go anywhere. It's a very interesting discussion. Right. And to unfold this conversation, Beena, I would want you to please answer my question. Do you feel that the rise of the Trump is again labeled as a pushback against this wokeism or cancel culture? And how do you see this is a problematic statement?
Thank you, Hajra. That's a really important point. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I actually do agree with you I really do feel that the rise of Trump actually is a reaction to this wokeism and the cancel culture and all, because if you look at it, you see that the journalists everywhere tend to be from a certain class, and particularly in America, college educated, urban, maybe not so much in Pakistan, but still more urban for sure. And so they were talking to people like themselves more. And so you have, and then there's also this other aspect, and I'll bring up something that might sound a bit controversial, but the point is that it does happen. There are gay people everywhere, right? And the people who voted for Obama, I came across one guy who said, I'm not racist, I voted for Obama. But when Obama government legalized gay marriage, that same person said, I'm going to vote for Trump. So there's a reaction to this, to the rising, I would say there's a rising tide of humanity and acceptance of multiple cultures, identities, and acceptance of people as they are, and wanting to go beyond borders and boundaries, and not wanting to, like adhere to the old traditions that you can only marry within this community, or you can only go here and all that. So you have people crossing borders and boundaries, and that makes people who want to hold on to what they call cultural values, communities, makes them very, very scared. So in the Trump case, as the Trump example that you gave, white men particularly felt very, very threatened, because there's this rise of, black activism, women's rights, LGBTQ, brown people coming up, Muslims, Hindus, South Asians in America. I mean, I'm just giving the example of America right now, but The same thing you will see in Pakistan, where people want to hold on to their culture, community, language, religion, tradition, and anything that cuts it, they feel threatened by. So then, when you have a platform like the social media that we have, it then gives rise to this kind of reaction, and it allows things that were not um, that were not acceptable in decent, polite society anymore. We had evolved beyond that.
Not just acceptable, but you know, people probably in our part of the world are not even open to these ideas. But very quickly towards the end, because we're short on time as well, now imagine that if we are to kind of speak about Trump government, you know, there was Elon Musk at the back, you know, there was Mark Zuckerberg, there was Jeff Bezos, you know, all of these people who actually in today's time have a hold on social media and news outlets and wherever the information is going to come out. How much do you think cancel culture is being affected or will take impact with the narrative building of all of these amazing people?
The amazing people, yeah. I think that's also a really good question. And I'll just bring your attention back to the social media pledge that I mentioned. So if you or your viewers go to sapannews.com, SAPANNEWS news.com, you'll see a social media pledge on the side. Now that is because you see, I think we can't do anything we can't control what these people do. We can't control what other people do. We can only control what we do. So if everybody who is on social media starts to follow those ethics and principles, it's like a little code of ethics. It's a revision for journalists and it's a training for non-journalists, because everybody who's on social media now, you know, everybody has this device and touch phones and smartphones. So everybody's on social. You're like a para-journalist, right? You have paramilitary, you have paramedics, you have para-legals. So what can we do as individuals, and how do we spread that influence? So like you guys are very aware, you ask such intelligent questions. So if you go to the social media pledge and you endorse it, and then you say, I have taken the social media pledge, and you ask your followers, I have taken this pledge, will you? So I'm just thinking that maybe this is a way to counter this. Because there was a student of mine in America who said, in a discussion on ethics and responsibility, journalistic ethics and responsibility, she said everyone should think like a journalist. Now, when I say everyone should think like a journalist, I'm talking about journalism as the principles that are accepted, not what's happening now, that people are calling themselves journalists, but they have no idea of these basic ethics and principles.
Right, and thank you so much, BEENA, for joining us and for explaining us to and participating in this debate of the cancel culture. And certainly it is one of the topics that is very relevant in today's society, and especially with the rise of social media, because you know, as it is said, that the birds of feather flock together, and there's extreme polarization and fragmentation that has been caused because of the echo chamber system. So now we're moving on to very interesting news, and that is that misophonia is getting annoyed by the chewing noises. So misophonia is a condition where common sounds like chewing, breathing or yawning causes intense anger and stress. It triggers an involuntary fight or flight response, often leading to isolation and distress. The new research has confirmed that people with misophonia react more strongly to trigger sounds than others. Although no one well understood, misophonia is a real disorder that affects the mental health and daily life, and it may be more widespread than previously believed.
Exactly. Thank you so much for saying that, Hajra, because I think I'm not going to name that person, but I just refer to him as Bhatti Saab. And I, you know, every time that he's sitting right next to me and eating food, I'm like, yeah, please, aap muh band karke khana kha sakte. I don't know why, but it is
so
always
misophonia.
Yeah, I think so. I think so, because now imagine that it's like, yaar, bhajan, aapka kya masla hai? You know, so I've been to so many other places as well where people, you know, would do that, and you find yourself in such an uncomfortable state. You're like, what's really happening? Why am I listening to these sounds? So Bhatti Saab, if you're out there, or anybody who's like Bhatti Saab, please make sure that you are, you know, a little caring towards people. If they don't like it, I mean, it's not really hard to kind of, you know, close your mouth and then chew. You know, why do you have to do, you know, we commonly call it chup chup, you know, chup chup karke khane ki zarurat nahi. But I think that's really important.
That's very true. And now we will move on to another very interesting topic, and that relates to also the mental health issues, because we've seen in the modern world, in the digital century, I would say, that there's generally a rise of mental illnesses across the world. So, but when we talk about the mental illnesses and the therapy sessions, they should be culturally informed, because you know, what people in America in a very individualistic, hyper individualistic society might be experiencing, they might not be experiencing that sort of same conditions in Pakistan in a very communitarian sort of a culture. So how to take that approach and how to go about the trauma informed approach. We are very glad that we have been joined by a mental health counselor. She happens to be FARWA Naqvi. Assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Right. So FARWA, please let us know in your practice, because whenever we talk about the therapy, right, it must be culturally informed practices, because like I mentioned, what we are experiencing in America, they say that if you are experiencing some sort of toxic relation, just cut it off. You can't do it here in Pakistan because we have a very hierarchy based system, right, and there is a concept and the notion of honor, of respect, of the strong familial ties. We can't just go and shut them out, right? How do you start your practice when you are doing it in Pakistan?
So basically, you know, if you're effectively trained and if you're trained internationally to work with different cultures, then you're trained in order to kind of like work with everybody, all genders, all sexualities, everybody coming from different religion and religious backgrounds, and as well as different nations. So of course you also have to educate yourself and get some exposure for yourself and, as well. And if you feel that, you know, you have a certain bias, and so like in our training, when we were training, so we were also put into therapy, into individual therapy and group therapy, and as long as I'll be practicing, I'll stay in therapy as well as supervision.
Yeah.
So whatever your own biases as a therapist are, then you know you also need to look out for your clients in order to heal yourself, so that you know you can suit them effectively.
And I always thought about this as well, that you know, that whenever you know you would go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist, what do they go through, you know? So that's a debate for another day. But now imagine that, you know, that we are so eager to kind of label somebody with, or you know, you have depression or you have anxiety, and you know, this use of this terminology itself, I think, because you know, whatever you say, it will eventually come back to you. So I would always kind of recommend people, please don't use these terminologies. If you have something, you know, please go to the right expert.
Right?
Yeah, it is triggering.
Yeah.
So, but you know, thank you so much for saying or using this word, because imagine that there was something that has happened in the past which has now triggered and actually made me or anybody else more vulnerable and get into trauma. How do you refer to that in the first place? Do you think that it's your always past experiences, the way that people behaved with you, that now finally you find it difficult to kind of cope up with whatever trauma you're going through?
So you see, just like language and just like, you know, where we're born to parents with the, you know, who come from a certain cultural and ethnic background. Yeah, so just like language, English or Urdu, the language that you're spoken to when you're a child, relationships are the language of the brain and of your feelings, and then that is how you relate to others and the world around you. So you know, there's this concept of adverse childhood experiences, and in my practice, you know, I've been practicing for years now, and there's something that I noticed, that whenever somebody would come up with, as you say, a label or a symptom of something, or just, you know, let's put it out, the anxiety or depression or maybe drugs addiction, or you know, any kind of symptom, I always observed that there was something underlying, and this was just a symptom that they thought was the pathology actually. Okay. So that's the reason why I went to the Trauma Research Foundation. Then I did a certification, because I always thought that, you know, childhood adverse experiences and trauma was there.
But that's one part of it. See, where we speak about communication and the words which were used while we were growing up. See, there's most of the time I think was non-verbal communication. दूर से ही ना तो पेड़ लगाऊंगी और आंखें और you know all of that. I don't know, you know, and even if God forbid if there's something disturbing, it's usually non-verbal, because people would want to kind of communicate in a way जहाँ पकड़ाई भी ना हो किसी की, you know. So how do you think that both of these elements will always contribute?
That was actually an example I was telling you, that you know, just like we learn the language and speak that language and think in that language, relationships and the way our parents and other people relate with us, that could be verbal, that could be physical, anyway, you know, it could be abuse, it could be neglect, it could be anything. That is how we relate with other people. So it's just not the language, that was an example, right? So you know, trauma falls vaguely into two categories. And so one is something that, you know, something that happens to you, an attack or abuse or something like that. But the other category which we don't talk about is that you experience something you shouldn't have, or maybe you haven't had something you should have. So, you know, a loving, nurturing, caring, safe environment, if you haven't had it, your body will react.
So this is a very technical question now. Now imagine that a few days ago we spoke about placebo effect. You know how, you know, when the kid won't take the medicine, we'll show him a biscuit and be like, oh, you know, the biscuit's coming, aeroplane and whatnot, and give him the medicine. And the kid won't even realize that, you know, okay, it was the medicine, right? Do you think that people who actually suffer from such illnesses or traumas or problems or are vulnerable can actually be treated by placebo effect? और कुछ गलत नहीं हुआ जानी, तुझे नहीं लग रहा, तुझे डिप्रेशन थोड़ी है, पागल हो गया तू, you know, things like that. We say that too often.
I think that would make matters worse, because you know it is it's actually heartbreaking and miserable that, you know, when what you're going through, other people are invalidating that, and you know, it can push you back into more loneliness, and then people wouldn't talk about their problems, and they wouldn't share, because they you know, people who go through mental health struggles, they have this notion that, you know, there's no point in talking about it, and then they also would go to very harmful coping mechanisms for that, because they feel like there's no point to talking about it because nobody will understand what we mean.
Right, right. And so I think they need the safe spaces to express themselves to win. So Farwa, we will move on to very interesting part, and that is that in our societies, right, in Desi households particularly, if you go and call for the help, right, help in terms of the therapy, or you know, go to a psychiatrist or psychologist, you know, that is often perceived as a betrayal to your community, because you're asking for the help, right? And it is not perceived as something very like honorable. There's always some sort of resistance to that. So in your practice, you know, do you think that these conversations are changing with the millennials, with the Gen Z? And often so we see that our parents are also struggling, right? But there are also our parents, we can see that there are traumas, we can see that, you know, they are engaging in a behavior that is very harmful behavior for themselves too, right? How can we also call them from a place of compassion and also make sure that, you know, they do not engage in such sort of behavior, right? It's very difficult.
So actually psychotherapy is picking up pace in Pakistan, and you know, I have clients more than I think people who were practicing before me would have clients. And so even from all around the world, because internationally when you speak about, you know, people who are living in other countries, they would resort to us because we would know the cultural context of the kids. And even like, you know, a Western therapist wouldn't understand their family structure, so they're tending to us that, you know, maybe you need to look at this thing in a more, you know, informed, culturally informed manner. That's true. But you know, what is something which would be interesting to you is that a lot of parents are now bringing in their kids for therapy, and I feel that's a big privilege for me as well, because parents are so controlling, as we know them, and they wouldn't want another person to be like, we can't do something about it, so please help us here. So I think that is a lot of trust that they're putting into us.
But I think, Farwa, I think Shahzad, this is a very important topic, and that is setting up the boundaries, right? And this concept is very alien to our parents' generation, because I think the only thing that they infer from the boundary is choke chakke, right? They do not understand that, you know, setting up a healthy limitation is also a part of the self-care, right? So how do we bring, you know, that conception into their vocabulary, into their lexicon, setting up the boundaries, right? Because they feel that we are abandoning them, and I think there's some sort of the trauma response that props up that, you know, we are letting them go, we're not taking care of them, we are being ungrateful, and, you know, we're not looking after them. It's a very difficult and a tightrope.
शर्म नहीं आती तुम लोगों को, बुजुर्ग हो गए हैं हम.
हमने पाला बहुत मुश्किलों से, all of these things, right? Obviously all are true. They brought us up in the best manner.
लेकिन इतनी तकलीफ हमने दी नहीं है.
You started off with a great note that, you know, in Western therapy style, it's more about, you know, alienation and all of that. But I feel that health, and basically in psychology and psychotherapy, the work that we do, I mean, a very good tip for you guys would be that, you know, if you meet a random person and they have this inclination or a tendency to create a split, you know, so it would manifest in their own splits. If you see a lot of heads at, you know, certain organizations and people, they tend to do it. If two people are talking, they would want to kind of like have a split. So that's not a very healthy tendency. When we talk about integrative therapy, that you know, I also holistic and integrative therapy, it means that we are bringing together all parts of you. Psychosis, it means splitting. That's the you know, the meaning of the word. So, you know, let's not split, and your health is in integration. So integrating your relationships, all kinds of facets of an you know, individual. So the thing is that with parents, let's not use these words, and let's not, you know, be that rational, and we can kind of like see if we can have a middle ground, because, you know, it's not that just we are there for parents, but they are very important for us as well.
Obviously.
And we've got to kind of like in these...
And I do know for a fact that my father's watching, so every time I'm going to sit down with him, and since I am the eldest son as well, he'll be like, kharcha bahut badh gaya. And I'm always like, but you know, you're the dad there, you know. So, but while we're at it, now imagine that most of the time, and this is basically our normal childhood, that that we ended up fighting with somebody probably in school. We got back home, they got told off by our teachers as well, or your kids fighting, whatnot, and then we get a beating at home too. So there was no consideration of what I might have gone through. हो सकता है मुझे स्कूल में भी मुझे ही मार पड़ी हुई हो. But yeah, so how do you think that in days to come, that obviously the culture has changed, so just to wrap it up, don't you think that with a lot of mental health professions available now, there's a decrease in jadoo and tona and taweez and all of that? Now, those conversations in any household and every household have actually decreased many folds because of the fact that now people are more aware of mental health illnesses.
See, unfortunately, even 90%, this is a WHO statistic, that 90% of people who actually need support cannot have the access due to financial means and the awareness. So, jadoo and all of these things, therefore, the people who cannot afford therapy, now people who even don't know what therapy means, and very unfortunately, a lay person cannot afford it. So, maybe, we also need to look into providing mental health access and support to all classes.
Exactly, and for that, certainly, if WHO says that, you really need to decrease your fee structure as well. But
I would love to do that, but even I have to tend to the same expenses like everybody else. So when people are doing something that is morally and ethically seen, at a pedestal, they expect us to do something about it. But we also have to make.
Obviously, you have your bills to pay, so so I think it needs to be a better understanding in between the patient and the doctor themselves as well, or the psychotherapist or the psychologist as well. But thank you so much, FARWA, for being with us. It is a topic which is very close to our hearts as well. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, there's something more interesting with Hajra now. I think it was a cat on a solo ride, right?
True. A pet cat travels by train to London on a 17-mile solo day trip. Wow. Lucky cat. A pet cat traveled for more than 17 miles by train on her own to London's Waterloo station, leaving her owner surprised. Tilly, a 2-year-old cat from the Weybridge, Surrey, is known for her adventurous spirit and frequently visits schools, inns and even the local vet. Her owners have fitted her with an Apple AirTag to make sure that her track of frequent adventures. Waterloo staff call her owner after finding her, marking her father's journey. Yet, Tilly's wanderings have made her a local celebrity. It's a very interesting cat, and काश हम भी बिल्ली की तरह होते हैं लंदन जाके वो फिर के वापस आ जाते हैं.
Imagine this cat coming back and telling her relatives, oh मैं लंदन से हो गया. What a cat. It's a nice story. But then there's another scary story in addition to this, and that is that satellite data actually shows that the world's frozen oceans, which help to keep the planet cool, currently have less ice than previously recorded. For all of those people who've been asking, Islamabad mein sardi nahi aayi, that's your answer. Sea ice at the north and south poles reflects the sun's energy, but as it shrinks due to rising temperatures, the darker ocean absorbs more heat, expediting global warming. The latest decline is driven by warm air, warm seas, and winds breaking the ice. In February, Arctic and Antarctic sea ice covered 15.76 million square kilometer, breaking the previous record low of 15.93 million square kilometer from early 2023.
Right, and now we have a story of someone who has made a name for himself, that too in the lands of America, and America often called the land of opportunities, because a lot of people go there, and if you have the talent, you can rise through the ranks and you can have a good life there. So a lot of people experiencing from rag to riches story. But in order to unfold this conversation, and without further monopolizing my conversation, I'm very glad that we have been joined by YASIR Hussain, who happens to be an entrepreneur. Assalamu alaikum, YASIR, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Assalamu alaikum.
Yasir, is so good to hear to this or listen to this accent for a gentleman who never knew a word of English. Now finally has his own franchise, became a franchisee over there. It's the 6,000th franchise. I'm not allowed to name the label as well. But how did you do it? What was the kind of skill that you really wanted to equip yourself, and finally you made it up to the ladder?
Honestly, I thank you for the kind words, but I always wonder how I did that. Because success is not overnight and it's not a big thing. It's accumulation of big success is usually accumulation of a lot of small things that you achieve. I tell my wife sometime that it's so amazing the person I became and how far I came. And also, I think my mother always praised for me. I think credit goes a lot to her, and my better half supports me a lot. So it was a complete dedication, and I always give myself smaller but achievable goals. Not a big one, but a lot of small ones over time. Could be
Exactly.
month, could be for a week, you know.
But
Uh,
Yasir, it took you 13 years to kind of, decide and be at a point where you are. Now imagine that most of the time what we have seen, amongst our friends and ourselves is that, that we, are too scared to take that initiative that we actually stay in the same place or in the same bubble. So for you to burst your previous bubble, when you were at a managerial post eventually, you could have been there, for a longer period of time. Why do you think there was a need for you to become a franchisee then?
so let me tell you this. I mean, and I know uh, my story, my original starting point was a dishwasher. This is how I started my life, and I'm proud of that. I learned a lot, and I wash dishes very well, and I take pride in that because that was my job description. That made me who I am. That gave me the hunger that I needed to be successful. Um, so I did manage locations, restaurants singly. I have done multi-store management too, but there was a point that I was doing okay in life, but there was a point that I really wanted to do something that I can say that I did it, and I did it for myself and for my family. And you know but I didn't do it for money. It was more like a job performance. I have, like I said, when I was a dishwasher, I always believed in being a perfect dishwasher. A best dishwasher you possibly can get. Same thing when I was managing a store. So it was a passion that was a fire in me that made me who I am.
Yeah.
Right. And Yasir, so from your story, I can discern this that when you think big, then you're going to achieve a lot of things. And that was the point that you took the leap of faith and you said that although I'm comfortable in this part, but I want to achieve more. But I'm pretty sure in this journey of yours, you might have encountered some obstacles. So how was your experiencing in America, in a land far away from your homeland, dealing with all of this situation? And what prompted you to go so higher? And in that journey, I want you to please connect with us in terms of your challenges and what were the obstacles you experienced in American society.
Look, Hajra, when I came here, I was from Pakistan, and and I was a kid that was born in Pakistan, and I love that piece of land, and I love anything about Pakistan because that is my country. I was born there, but I'm an American citizen, and U.S. is my country now. So a lot has changed, over time. I've been here from almost 20 years or 20 plus years, and this is exactly what I have done. I mean, going from job to owning my own business, that's one thing. And I can talk about all the hard time I had, and honestly, it's gonna need a lot of time for that. I mean, it was not an easy journey. It was tough, but like I said, I have given myself smaller but achievable goals, and one step at a time. And they all have to be baby steps. You think big, but you plan small.
And
You
Yasir,
plan
this
one
is
step.
exactly that, I'm really happy that, we are in conversation with you because imagine that, that one, I mean, it's no formula, but this is exactly what I thought life needs to be and people need to understand. Number one, that whenever you have an opportunity, you give your best. Number two, that, if you are able to break your bigger goal into smaller goals, that will always help you be where you want to be in life. So for me to kind of, you're the first person that I've come across who has actually learned it the hard way because I learned it the hard way myself. There's no overnight victory. There's no overnight becoming famous for, most of the people in this world. So how do you think that, you're going to inspire all of those millions of people out there who are listening to you right now? How did you break your bigger goal into smaller goals and give it your best?
Look, planning is one of the things. If you can plan things, I plan things for myself. I planned my life, and let me explain you this way. I think deep. I take words very seriously. I I listen to them, and when I'm talking to somebody else, I make sure I listen to them, and I try to figure out what they exactly mean uh, by what they want to tell me. But again, smaller achievable goals, the big picture when it comes to planning could be planning for financials, it could be planning for your operations, it could be planning for maybe more staffing for your business, maybe getting more help. All that, you can't be perfect in everywhere. You can't. It's just a business. It's not realistic. So what you do, you take, if you're missing a smaller portion, or that's your gray area in your planning, then you can supplement that with something else. You could possibly, if your financials are okay, you can possibly inject some finances to market your position if you're hiring, or if you need more stuff. So I mean,
Right, and thank you so much, Yasir, for giving us this wonderful advice and for sharing your story. And I'm pretty sure that inspired so many people out there. And that is, if you work hard and if you have broader thinking and if you think big, then you can achieve a lot of things. So with that, we are winding up this program.
We just have to give away our email address, so please make sure that you give us your feedback on worldthismorning@ptv.com.pk. Yeah, we are ready, we are all ears, and we would love to bring all of those changes which you would want us to kind of, and if they're going to help us, produce a better show as well. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, look after yourselves. 1, 2, 3. Good morning. Have a great day.